For years, I've faced ridicule for claiming these four covered up the AIDS lab leak theory 20 years ago. But now that people are realizing they likely covered up the recent Wuhan COVID lab leak, I'm upping the ante by asking ChatGPT to present the indisputable facts and offering a $1,000 reward to either a whistleblower who leaks evidence proving what happened to the Congo samples, or to shut up those insisting the theory was refuted. I will give you the money if you find just one scientific paper that ChatGPT confirms merely attempts to refute the actual AIDS polio vaccine theory. See, the theory's most compelling endorsement comes not from its advocates, but from the scientists armed with solid evidence to confirm or debunk it. Even the papers Fauci and the establishment universally hail as a definitive takedown, without exception, ChatGPT will confirm the scientists actually found the theory so bulletproof that to stick to the government's single narrative and keep Fauci's funding tap flowing, they had no choice but to resort to preposterous logic flaws and paraphrase a distorted caricature of the theory to give the illusion of refuting it. But first, ChatGPT, what are just the indisputable facts?
Early live polio vaccines were developed using primate kidneys and did carry additional primate viruses. When the AIDS virus was identified decades later, the Wistar Institute, the producer of the implicated polio vaccine, acknowledged that the possibility of their vaccine containing the AIDS virus couldn't be entirely ruled out, as monkeys used in the US vaccine production were known to carry a variant of the AIDS virus. The director noted the presence of innumerable primate viruses in monkey kidney culture, with no reliable method to entirely remove them from the vaccines, suggesting the possibility that most vaccine batches could contain unknown primate viruses.
And where did poor countries like the Congo get their vaccines?
In the early days of polio vaccine production, some underdeveloped countries used provided seed stock to locally produce vaccines. These countries may have used different types of readily available primates and potentially had varying quality control standards. Consequently, Wistar acknowledged they did not have precise information about what primate types were used in these local productions.
Now, ChatGPT cannot watch this film featuring interviews of the staff who worked at Wistar's Congo lab explaining how they made the Congo vaccine. But you can verify this man described extracting chimp kidneys that were passed on to this man who said he prepared them to grow the polio virus. This man confirmed he grew the polio virus in those chimpanzee kidneys. This man admitted bottling the concoction in 50 milliliter vials he labeled polio vaccine, and which were administered to everyone in Kinshasa, Congo around 1957. The AIDS lab leak theory is simply that they told the truth. I mean, ChatGPT confirmed. Nobody disputes that is how they made vaccines back then. And if they used chimpanzee kidneys, it would have logically resulted in the AIDS pandemic. And even Dr. Fauci conceded using chimps would make it a, quote, open and shut case that the vaccine was the source of AIDS. The scientist with the most hard evidence is probably Michael Warraby, the same scientist that Fauci used to refute the Wuhan COVID lab leak. Now, Warraby admits going to that Congo lab in 2000, and eyewitnesses confirm they removed the contents of that lab's archives, including, it seems, the tissue samples used to make the vaccine. Yet I could find only one interview when Warraby was even asked about them. And after dodging the question twice, listen to what he finally says.
We'll come to that, but did you find any of the original polio sample that was used?
So I wasn't looking for anything clinical or anything to do with polio directly.
Warraby gives this evasive non-answer because it's a fact that after he got back, the samples Dr. Fauci submitted for testing to settle the theory were not the ones from the Congo lab. Rather, Fauci submitted samples made in the US from Asian rhesus monkeys, the only species used known not to contain the AIDS virus. Those samples obviously came back negative. But ChatGPT, what happened to the Congo samples?
It's unclear what samples, if any, remain from the Congo lab and if they have been tested.
As Warraby was pressed on this, listen to how he dismisses the theory.
Whether the viruses that these chimps have look like the human form or whether they're a distant cousin, and it looks like they're distant cousins in that area.
So this is the argument which Nature claimed refuted the theory. ChatGPT, please summarize.
Warraby paraphrases the theory as suggesting the polio vaccine was made using PTS chimpanzees. He counters this by demonstrating that the HIV virus, responsible for the AIDS pandemic, originated in PTT chimpanzees, thus the polio vaccine could not be the source of AIDS.
The key is, as always, Warraby paraphrases the theory rather than quoting it. So ChatGPT, did Warraby resort to a desperate strawman, or did he accurately state the theory he purports to refute?
Warraby's paper simplifies the theory by stating it involves chimpanzees specifically from the Stanleyville area. However, Hooper's theory suggests chimps were collected from a larger region, including places where PTT chimps were found. Thus, Warraby's argument that HIV originating in PTT chimps refutes the theory is not fully aligned with Hooper's broader claim about the geographical range of chimps involved.
Yet somehow Nature and their peer reviewers let this slip by, and Warraby obviously knew attempting to refute the actual theory was futile. But later, Warraby's 2008 paper flew off the rails in its absurdity. So consider this. Doctors do occasionally stow away blood and tissue samples, and in the pursuit of AIDS origin, scientists tested these historic samples globally. All came back negative until we hit Kinshasa, 1959, 2 years post-administration of the vaccine, when 3 samples tested positive for the AIDS virus. Now, Warraby insists this is evidence of an AIDS pandemic in Kinshasa since the 1920s. But let's engage our brains here. Why then weren't there samples from the 30s and 40s that doctors archived because their patients were manifesting mysterious symptoms of this then unknown disease? And what about these 3 patients who tested positive a couple years after they presumably got the vaccine? Remember, AIDS has a long asymptomatic incubation period followed by distinctive symptoms which would have puzzled doctors back then and been noted on the medical records. So, ChatGPT, what do the medical records for these 3 samples show? Were the patients already manifesting AIDS-like symptoms, implying they got the virus many years earlier, perhaps before vaccination? Or were they still asymptomatic, suggesting they were recently infected, like around the time they just got the vaccine?
The individuals from whom the samples were taken were not specifically noted to have AIDS-related symptoms at the time the samples were collected. It is possible that these individuals were within the typically long asymptomatic phase of HIV infection when sampled.
So ChatGPT, just ballpark, how many in Kinshasa might have contracted AIDS if the theory were correct?
Based on speculative assumptions aligned with the OPV theory, an estimated maximum of 42 individuals could have potentially been infected in Kinshasa.
Now, Warraby knows the theory is the vaccine was made from hundreds of chimps, and therefore predicts a positive sample would pop up every few years in Kinshasa, and each presenting a unique strain. ChatGPT, how does Warraby concede this precise sequence of events did occur, yet insist it actually contradicts the theory?
Warraby's 2008 paper suggests HIV's diversity points to decades-long evolution, though it doesn't discern whether this occurred in humans or chimps. While most scientists posit a natural chimp-to-human transmission with subsequent human spread, an alternative hypothesis considers a mass AIDS virus introduction via a 1957 vaccine made from many chimps. This could explain HIV's sudden, diverse presence in 1959 Kinshasa, aligning with the study's findings.
Those are the indisputable facts presented by ChatGPT. And if you think the theory was refuted, please just put up or shut up. Just post a link and claim the $1,000 reward.